Greetings, everyone. In the Substack world, go along, TD.com. This is long overdue. I've been dying to chat with my friend Bob Sturm of Sturmstack. He is covering everything Dallas sports down there in the great state of Texas. And I can't remember when we first connected, Bob. It was probably something Packers in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel days.
Yeah.
I know Bob, but when did we first connect?
You know, I would assume it's when you and Bob started doing a podcast, at the Journal Sentinel. I grew up thinking Bob McGinn, was the greatest thing on the planet. And he, as you know, writes football in his own unique way and does kind of whatever he wants, which is great. I mean, it's honestly, our whole business is just a bunch of people mimicking other people they see. And so when you see someone who literally doesn't care how anyone else does it, he's going to do it his way. That was somewhat inspirational to young me. And, you know, it's kind of my portal to football was seeing the game like he sees it, I think, which honestly is way more interesting than how the mass media does. And so I started following him wherever he went. And obviously when you two started doing a Packer podcast, I've been living down here since 1998, but I was absolutely born a cheesehead and will no doubt die a cheesehead. So I follow two teams very, very carefully and closely, one for fun or for, I guess, passion purposes, the Packers, and then one for career purposes, which is its own unique, awesome journey as well, which is the Cowboys. And so once I knew that Bob McGinn approved of Tyler Dunn, then I brought you into the network, and I'm sure I reached out to you because I eventually loved doing that and connecting with guys who I respect their work. And then, you know, before long, you're headed down the Substack path, and I was like, man, that sounds really cool. Well, I'm going to keep working for the Athletic until the Athletic decided I'm no longer working for them. And then, you know, it just seemed like since I was one of your customers that there was a pivot available for the Cowboy fandom. And so I jumped on that. And I think both of us would say it's been unbelievable and really the best thing that's ever happened to either of us is being laid off by a big media company, and to go from there is just the best.
Man, you're absolutely right, Bob. I couldn't have said it better myself. Well, first of all, on Bob, because anything you think about Bob, just like reading him from afar, listening to him from afar, it's times it by 100. He's just an A+ human being. I mean, really, we just had our third child, Rocco, and that was like one of the first calls I made back home.
Wow.
Next thing I know, I get a package in the mail, and him and Pat, his wife, they've got gifts for Ella, Sonny, Rocco.
Right.
A few days pass. He sends me an email in all caps. How's Rocco doing? We need an update.
That's awesome.
Just an awesome person. I mean, really living out there in Green Bay, covering the Packers with Bob at the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. Like the highlight of every single week was just posting up in Bob's kitchen. You know, I had podcast equipment. I don't even know if it worked. I think I just was pushing buttons, and it didn't actually make the audio quality any better. As you probably know, we had malfunctions galore. But we were just bullshit about the Packers every week. It was like the infancy of podcasts. I just remember listening to Adam Carolla all the time. He was like the king of it.
Yeah.
Like, do this on the Packers, and it was fun. I'm glad folks enjoyed it.
Well, and I think what's important for us to articulate to people that don't know Bob McGinn, at least know his work is that he came at football from a different angle. And, you know, if you read Go Long now, you know what that angle is because, frankly, he hasn't really moved 3 inches since the 80s. And I say that in a good way. But what I mean is, when people are hashing out storylines of just cliches, first of all, you know, the athlete gets to camp in the best shape of his life and just all these things we do every year. Like if someone would keep a notebook on how the media covers football, you know, we could easily fill out each month, you and I, Tyler, with just traditional media content. and it's just not interesting to either of us. And part of that's because Bob McGinn. And so I can't tell you how blown my mind was when he was grading individual players in Packer games like in the mid 80s. And I could not fathom that because, to me as a teenager, I'm watching the ball. I think of Pat Kerwin, another guy who's really influenced my career is just Pat Kerwin's Take Your Eyes Off the Ball, and just listening to him do radio and talk out the game of football. You're like, okay, this is not like what we get spoon fed by the mass media. And so the idea that you can dig into a play and have more to say than that was a touchdown or that was a turnover. I mean, it blew my mind. And then once you open that door, you keep going deeper and deeper and deeper. So suddenly, when you talk to a coach or a player, they almost instantly recognize, not that you're trying to impress them, but they almost instantly recognize that you can at least sort of speak the language that is actually spoken inside rooms and inside, meetings. So that's all Bob McGinn for me. I mean, that is like, okay, we're going to share with the public information that isn't normally out there. And, now what, 40 years later, the game has changed for so many people, but here's Bob McGinn still doing his draft profiles and still do, I know. So I just think that's worth pointing out to young football minds that now have PFF and have all 22 and just have all this information. I mean, you can just go back 10 years and there was this black market for all 22 where we had to like know somebody who knew somebody to get access. And now it's common, but just imagine what was out there for football media in the mid 80s. And, to be on the cutting edge, I just did a piece on Tom Landry and the shotgun. And I love the fact that in 1974, Tyler, there were 0 snaps in shotgun, 0 in the entire NFL. And now, I think the number last year was 21,500 or something like that. So like 63% of all snaps are shotgun. Then you add 15% more in pistol, and we're under center in the NFL like 25% of the time. It was 100% until 1975. And I'm not saying Tom Landry was the first person to use shotgun, but he was the first to start this 50-year trend of 0% to 75%. And, it was to help Staubach, and it was to kind of revive Staubach's career a little bit. So, that stuff is fascinating, but you wrote an entire book about tight ends. So if someone loves minutia, it's my guy, Tyler Dunn.
Well, man, it's awesome to have you here too, Bob, because I feel like the Cowboys are one of those perpetually compelling organizations for
Yes.
a million reasons. And I've tried to kind of get to understand this team through some folks who were in that front office, like
Right.
up close, seen Jerry operate, Steven operate, the scouts, and you're covering the team
Yeah.
data down there. So, all right, I mean, our readers, our listeners, they kind of get a sense for what we've gleaned and Jerry's philosophy clashing with Steven's philosophy.
Right.
One's a riverboat gambler that would love to do whatever it takes to win. The other is the other extreme, doesn't want to get
Yep.
caught up into dead money.
Yep.
And what do you have? I mean, you wait forever on Dak and CD and Micah Parsons. Now, deals that could get done ahead of time. You move the money around. It's always fungible. And you add those few pieces that you need on defense. I mean, Cincinnati, I mean, that's what's fascinating to
Yeah.
me. The
Right.
Cowboys are the richest franchise in sports, and they have this problem. The Bengals are one of the cheapest, and they've got this problem. It's maddening because both teams, in my opinion, have the quarterback that could get to a Super Bowl, win it, yet
Yeah.
aren't taking advantage of the now because they don't want to pay bills down the road. Are fans? Is the pitchfork in hand? Are they ready to go to the star? Are they that pissed? Or you talk about how this cycle of NFL coverage works. Now it's July. It's going
Yeah.
to get to August, and maybe excitement will set in again, and everybody's okay with how things are going down there.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting, Tyler, because there's the micro and the macro, right? So the macro version of the Cowboys is this is the 30th year in the wilderness since Super Bowl 30. In fact, the symmetry of the Super Bowl 60 season is perfect. So now you can look at the Super Bowl era, and I know we all have different ways of defining modern football. Some of us use Super Bowl one, some of us use the merger, some of us use 1960 when a bunch of franchises were born, including the Dallas Cowboys and I think the Buffalo Bills, maybe 61. But you know that was a time where people are like, okay, we're not doing leather helmets and we're throwing the ball forward and things like that. So if you look at Super Bowl one to Super Bowl 30, the Cowboys are without question, and it's unbelievable, the most successful franchise in the NFL. And it's, you know, you can count Super Bowls, you can count championship games, you can count playoff years. Any way you want to slice it, the Dallas Cowboys were the gold standard. And obviously Jerry Jones was a big part of that because you could argue in the Super Bowl era, the Cowboys with 3 out of 4 is the best dynasty. Now, clearly, New England has 2 dynasties, and so if you push them together, of course, and the Steelers 4 and 6, and there's a bunch of ways to slice it. But the Cowboys 1 through 30, unbelievable, and then 31 through 60, which we haven't done 60 yet, but 31 through 59, the Cowboys are in the bottom 5 franchises in terms of postseason achievements. And that is weird. And it's weird for a number of reasons, but it's taken its toll on the fan base, not from a standpoint of they can't fill that stadium, and not from a standpoint of they're not number one in revenues. So the real mystery and the weird thing about somebody from Wisconsin coming down here and jumping into this narrative really about Super Bowl, I guess my first one in town would have been like 33 or 34. So I didn't get here exactly when it changed, so they can't blame me. But I've seen pretty much all of the second era. And I got here at age 26 and I turned 53 a couple weeks ago. So my beard has changed colors. But for the most part, I was already bald. For the most part, it's been this crazy trip where they've had good talent, really good teams. They never really bottomed out except when Dave Campo was here from 2000 to 2002, but they've never been a threat in January. You know, in fact, they've had a couple number one seeds where we were like, okay, this is their year. And then very quickly they're dismissed. And so the macro version is an entire generation has been born who have never seen the Cowboys good. And those people are almost 40 now, Tyler. And so I mean, if you think about, to many of us, Irvin, Emmett, Troy feel like yesterday or a couple years ago. And you know, we still see Troy on TV, we still see Michael on TV. And so and Troy looks way younger than me, even though he's way older than me. And so, you know,
I
you
wish
just look at
I saw Emmett on TV too. I kind of miss.
yes.
You never
Well, there was some fine unintentional comedy at times with our guy Evan Smith. But you know, from the macro standpoint, it's a whole generation of people that just haven't seen it. And so the cynicism is high. I assure them, because I saw the Ron Wolf, Mike Holmgren era, I assured them that there will be a new dawn. It will happen. It's a matter of when, not if. The Cowboys have too many advantages to screw this up forever. But the belief is very, very low. And then from a micro version, they're a team that frankly looks like they should be in the top handful in the NFC just about every year. And so the McCarthy years are really interesting because they're winning 12 games every year, but they're not winning the games that everybody considers showdown games. Okay, you're playing the Niners on Sunday Night Football. You're playing, you know, they've always done well in their division, but maybe that's more about the division. But they never have quite measured up to those showdown games or those heavyweight fights. And so, you know, even 12 wins was quickly minimized by perception of, but it doesn't matter. And I'm not that kind of guy because I know how hard it is for these teams to get wins against anybody in this league. And if you go 36-15 over 3 years, I'm sorry, you're a good football team, but they've got this giant boulder on their back of 30 years that tells everybody that nothing matters until they can finally find the combination in January. So cynicism's high, apathy's high. My answers are long, but I will tell you it's complicated down here with the Cowboys because they're not that bad. And frankly, I can't believe the win total over under. I'm not a big gambler. In fact, I'm not even a small gambler, really. But when I see an over under of 7.5 wins, I'm like, are you serious? 7.5? They have like the 13th highest win total in the NFC. That means Carolina and the Saints and the Giants are the only three teams with lower win totals in Vegas than the Cowboys. And I'm looking at this roster, and they just had George Pickens. And I got to tell you, I think 7.5 is stealing money personally.
That was a hell of a breakdown, Bob. And you mentioned Mike McCarthy, and as a Packer consumer for
Yeah,
decades, you probably remember when I wrote at Bleach Report. It wasn't
right.
pretty when it comes to Aaron Rodgers, Mike McCarthy, and Ted Thompson.
Yep.
Really, there was part of me that kind of understood why Aaron Rodgers would just do whatever the hell he wants at the line of scrimmage a lot of the time. At the same time, man, did I feel for Mike McCarthy with
Right.
this Cowboys tenure because, gosh, there was a story that somebody shared with us here where he's in the cafeteria. Like, these coaches, they've got meetings upon meetings. They're running this way, running that way. They got 10 minutes to eat. And he's in there, and there's just marketing people everywhere, just yucking it up. And, you got the tours going by, the players,
Yes.
circus, all entertainment. And Mike McCarthy turned to somebody in line and goes, if I knew it was like this, I wouldn't have come here. Right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think I think there was truth to that more than just being tongue in cheek. He was fed up with how, granted, you could say I pushed back to the source. Like, he had to have known going into this, right?
Oh, yeah.
And this source told me, who's in the Cowboys front office for a long time. He said, yeah, but there is a lot of ego in pro football. And you think that you're the one that can
Right.
win, that can work with this. And it is
Yes.
the richest franchise. And there is Dak Prescott. There is talent. You do have some pelts on the wall if you're Mike McCarthy, but even he gets in there, has more success than I would have predicted. His
Right.
offense, Dak plays as well as he's ever played. Second in the MVP
Yes.
voting. Looked amazing in 2023 before
Right.
that Jordan Love buzzsaw at the.
Yes.
But I don't know. Like, to me, that's the state of the Dallas Cowboys. It's a circus, and whether it's Brian Schottenheimer or Andy Reid, I don't know if it really matters who's
Right.
coach. Right, the state of the team is one of just, I don't know. Winning isn't really that important. I mean, Bryce Butler talked about it earlier this week. Winning is not priority number one. Is that too strong of a statement to make?
Well, I mean, how it's impossible to say it's too strong of a statement because we have 29 years of evidence, and so that's where what I try to do at my site is cover the Cowboys without making the main thing all the time, because that's just too depressing. And look, it just is. If you're basically waiting for somebody to pass on from this world, then what are we even doing? There's no joy in sports. Like we can do that with politics, for crying out loud, and world leaders, and we can say, man, I can outlive this guy. I can survive this. We don't want to bring that to sports because what a beating that is, and sports is our great escape, right? But the reality is that the only way to have true change in the way the Dallas Cowboys operate is for either a full leadership change, which is unlikely to happen because there's no election here, and or you have the person at the top get sick and tired of being sick and tired. And what that requires is basically understanding what his goal is. And I can't get out of my head. In fact, I even have the audio. And this, as a radio guy, if you can get a famous quote audio, then it lives forever, and you can actually play it for people because people will say, "There's no way he said that." But I remember the quote was, they got beat by the Eagles. So for 3 years, I need to digress for a moment, Tyler. 2011 to 2013, the Cowboys under Jason Garrett finished 8-8, 8-8, 8-8, which was very Bart Starr of him in the early '80s with the Packers. But anyway, they were so 24 and 24. What's crazy about it is each of those years they had essentially a play-in game on the final week of the season. And so in 2011, it was a play-in game with the Giants. The Giants won it, and of course took out the Packers and won the Super Bowl. And in 2012, it was RG3 and Washington, as RG3 is playing with a torn ACL, and he still just destroys the Cowboys out there in Washington. And then in 2013, it was the Eagles. And so in each of these cases, if the Cowboys win, they're in the playoffs and they win the division. And if they lose, their season's over at 8-8 again. So this is like Jason Garrett's first 3 seasons, and it's a unbelievable opportunity. Well, the first one and the second one were both on the road, and so the excuse was, well, how are you going to win a road game against a rookie quarterback with a torn ACL? And so, but in 2013, they're playing the Eagles. Now Kyle Orton is their quarterback because Romo hurt himself, as he was wont to do, with a week to go. And so they're playing the Eagles, and they end up losing 24-22 or something like that. And after the game, Jerry is interviewed about, just you must be so frustrated. You must be, this must be the worst thing that's ever happened. Are you embarrassed with 3 straight years of 8-8 and losing the play-in game? And his quote was very similar, something like this. He was like, "How can you be embarrassed standing in a stadium like this? There's your answer." And at that moment, it occurred to me, and I've listened to it a million times and I've written pieces about it. It occurred to me that he doesn't think he's losing. And the reason he doesn't think he's losing is every year the Forbes list comes out, and whether it's total revenues for the year or total franchise value for the year, they are not only number one in the NFL, Tyler, they're number one in the world. And that means Real Madrid and Manchester United and all these cash cows overseas. And of course, your Yankees and your Lakers and you name it. You name the best franchise on the planet. And every year, the Dallas Cowboys print money. So much so that because there's a salary cap, they are guaranteed to make, like, I forget the last figure I looked up, but it's like 300 million in profits like every season. And it's year after year after year. So every owner in sports, it worships Jerry Jones and basically says, how can we figure out how to become the Dallas Cowboys? And Jerry Jones obviously lives that. Like, that's something he can control. He can't play quarterback. He can't coach the team, although he thinks he can. But he can run a business, because obviously they don't just give out number one in the world on the Forbes list to anybody. And so because he has been so victorious in the one thing billionaires understand, which is making money, he can't even really admit that he's failed. And so when I go back to the being sick and tired of sick and tired, he isn't, because he's succeeding. He's winning his Super Bowl every year, Tyler. And that's the disconnect is, if you or I are trying to do something and we continuously fail at it, we would eventually have our come to Jesus moment where we're like, man, I've hit rock bottom. Okay, I will do it. I will stop eating sweets because I want to lose weight. I will do a 180 in life because I'm tired of failing. He's succeeding in his mind. The Super Bowl would be frosting on the cake, but he's winning his Super Bowl, and he's winning it big every year. So much so that, like, number 2 in revenues in the NFL for a long time was New England. And I want to say it's by a mile. Like it's not quite double, but it's several $100 million that the Cowboys put in their pocket that nobody else does because they absolutely have fixed the system.
I thought that Bryce put it perfectly down those lines too. And like, there is no urgency. There is
Right.
no pressure. We think that there's pressure, but it's all inflated by the Stephen A's and the Ryan Clarks and the Shannon Sharps, and it's
Right.
media driven. They're a media bonanza, and I'm sure Jerry and Steve they're all cool with that because
Right.
if you're in the headlines, the old cliche, right? Any news is good news, and you're gonna
Oh yeah.
keep on printing money. But there is nobody really fears for their job in there. Like these coaches, they hang around
It's
for a
comfortable.
while. It's comfortable.
Yeah.
And it just goes back to the whole Bill Parcells dynamic. The one
Right.
time where Jerry did bring in a coach with a ton of credibility, Super Bowls in the trophy case, and he
Right.
gave some personnel control. And they won 10 games with Quincy Carter and got to the playoffs.
Yep.
What
Yep.
I was told is like Jerry did that because he wanted his new stadium. And then he said he was miserable. He couldn't
Right.
stand he couldn't stand his own team winning if he wasn't the one making the decisions. If he wasn't the
Yeah.
one credit, and he vowed, I will never do that again. Like
Right.
I'll never see power again. So that
So
ain't gonna happen.
no, but so the coaches he's hired since then are kind of different versions of themselves, right? Or different versions of the template that he's looking for, which is agreeable, controllable, willing to put up with the terms. So, even like the Belichick stuff over the last couple of years is a different version of the Bill Cowher stuff and the Pete Carroll stuff and all of these alpha coaches that are out there and available. John Gruden was over there for a while. Sean Payton was, the name changes on who the hot boy, the Cowboys would love to get this guy. But in the end, every time they hire a guy who's compliant and very thankful to be hired. And the McCarthy one was interesting because I'm like, man, is McCarthy going to be like another version of Jason Garrett and Wade Phillips? Because both of those guys were so agreeable. I mean, Wade Phillips let Jerry hire his staff pretty much, at least on the offensive side of the ball. I think Wade knows a ton about football, but it's not healthy to have your OC hired before your head coach. That's just not healthy. And that was part of the job is if you want this job, Jason Garrett's going to be your OC. And by the way, Jason Garrett's going to replace you as soon as we feel like it's time. And so he did. And then Jason Garrett never put together successive playoff years. I mean, that's a pretty low bar, Tyler. We know it's impressive to make the playoffs, but if you have 10 years at some point, I'm going to need you to string two playoff seasons together with this roster, with Tony Romo and Jason Witten and DeMarcus Ware, and Des Bryant, and then we'll replace them with Dak and Zeke and Micah Parsons. I guess he didn't get Micah. Let me strike that from the record. But they had really good teams. They had the one seed in
Oh, that
2016. They were unbelievable in 2014. So the idea of making back-to-back playoffs is a low bar. He never did it. And finally, after 10 years, Jason Garrett was out. But I will note, he didn't fire him. He waited for his contract to expire and then sort of left him in limbo for two weeks as he's trying to decide, should I hire Mike McCarthy? Like Jason Garrett's still like in his office. It was the craziest thing ever. So in all these cases, including Brian Schottenheimer, we are hiring from the same bin of coaches who are willing to accept these terms. And so that keeps everybody comfortable. And those are the types of people that usually have long careers with the Dallas Cowboys is they're going to keep their eyes on their paper. They're not going to rage against the machine. They're going to accept these terms and do what's required. So when I look at like Schottenheimer, I look at a guy who honestly is really impressive when you hear him talk, when you hear him coach, when you hear his ideas. And we're at the same point because I was sitting there for the Dave Campbell press conference in the year 2000. And I was thinking, I'm looking at him and I'm like, all I could think of, Tyler, was this is the happiest day in this guy's life. Like look at Dave Campbell. He is a secondary coach who is now the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. You could just feel how happy he was, and you could sense that. I am witnessing the happiest day in a man's life. And you, so that makes you root for a guy because he's so nice and he's so earnest and just he wants to do the right thing and he wants to raise the Dallas Cowboys back to the promised land. And he's inheriting Emmitt Smith and Troy Aikman, so surely Dave Campbell, he can probably figure this out. And of course, he followed Chan Gailey, who followed Barry Switzer, and in the end, you saw that Dave Campbell never had a chance. He was never really supported by ownership, and they never really were aggressive. And I don't even know what they were doing, but you're right. They needed a stadium, so they needed Bill Parcells. But since then, with Schottenheimer, I don't think he's a bad choice. I just don't think anyone else thought he was a good choice.
Hmm.
And so that doesn't mean they're wrong. Schottenheimer, like I said, I actually have felt my own personal optimism grow since the hiring is that, oh, this is new. But if you look again at the macro view, it's like the hidden ball trick. Like we've tried this before and we get football people who love this sport, media fans. We are so attracted to new because we don't know how this story is going to end. So we're like, maybe this is the right combination. And so it is following the same steps we've been down before. Maybe Shotty is ready for this moment and maybe he's going to take it over and maybe he's going to figure out how to make his culture fit underneath the Joneses culture. But I will say we have 29 years of experience. Usually what happens is the coach isn't actually the head coach. He doesn't actually have permission to bench a player who's not, doing what he needs to do. He doesn't have the ability to be the final say in the room. He doesn't have the ability to even have final say to the media because Jerry forever loves doing his media availability exactly at the precise time Mike McCarthy's at the podium in postgame. Find for me an owner who competes with his own coach in postgame press conferences. Find an owner who needs a postgame press conference. But that's where we are.
Yeah, I'm laughing. I'm thinking back to that press conference that all three of them gave ahead of last year's training camp, and like
Yeah,
Mike McCarthy is literally the monkey in the middle. He's got Steven on one side, Jerry on the other, and there's just so much nonsense spewed that really doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, Jerry is just talking in circles about being all in. Probably had a few glory hole references, and
right,
hell, he wants to be, to your point, the guy in charge. So
right.
how do you operate within that infrastructure just to kind of give listeners an idea what that looks like? With Jason Garrett, I get it. He should have won more games and he was there a long time and he had talent. I like Mike McCarthy. I kind of feel for Jason because
Yeah,
there's one person who told me like he would just have these hours and hours long meetings with Jerry to try to like gently nudge him to the correct decision, whether it's pre-draft meetings, free agency stuff, anything football. Like you couldn't just go to Jerry and be like, "We're doing this. This is the best thing to do." It
right.
you kind of help him get there so he feels like it's his call.
His
And
idea.
Jason Garrett was really good at that. So it probably could have gone off the rails, but he did kind of navigate this impossible situation as a head coach, but best he could. And
Yeah,
that's wasn't those pre-draft meetings with Jerry. Like you have to somehow get him one-on-one outside of the meetings and put some thoughts in his head and get him to think it's his call, which
right.
is which is kind of, I mean, this is somewhat recent that I heard it. So I was under the assumption, well, of course he's taking a step back. He's old, like, and of course,
Yes,
making the call, and he probably is making a lot of decisions. And Will McClay obviously does a great job with the draft and
that's
personnel,
right.
but still, and as well as they draft, it's still Jerry. He's still there. He's still the point man. It still has to go through him.
Right. Yeah, and people know that, and those people that are willing to work here, which isn't everybody, and I listed a bunch of names earlier that have been linked to the Cowboys until you actually talk to them or their people, and they're like they were never going to be able to work in that situation, and they knew it, and so you know even in January, they were like, you know what? Jerry Jones is talking to Pete Carroll right now. Well, we come to find out he's talking to Pete Carroll not about his opening. but he's talking to Pete Carroll about, what do you think of Brian Schottenheimer? And and because I don't think Pete Carroll would ever come back to coaching if he didn't think he had a pretty big say in the matter on just about everything that matters to him. He could make some choices. I think Bill Belichick obviously would not want Jerry, being Jerry. With Garrett, the craziest thing, and this is kind of when I tried to stop being so hard on Jason Garrett and more so kind of treated almost a hostage situation is a little strong, Tyler, but he's just kind of doing what he needs to do to remain an NFL head coach. Because another thing famously about Cowboys coaches, they don't really get rehired again when the Cowboys are done with them. There's not I know Wade Phillips obviously had great success as a coordinator afterwards, but there hasn't been a robust market for Jason Garrett, really. There hasn't, I don't anticipate Mike McCarthy's the next hot name, although he surely will get hired with his win-loss record at two different places. But, you start to say, this is a really tough job, but they don't realize it until it's too late. Because honestly, how many people have enough leverage in life that they can say no to a head coaching job for one of the flagship franchises in the NFL? That's difficult, Tyler. So the story, though, is a very famous moment in 2016, which starts with Tony Romo getting hurt in preseason. And Romo in 14 could have won NFL MVP. Rodgers beat him, and I forget who else was in the mix that year, probably
JJ
Tom
Watt.
Brady. Yeah, okay, yeah. So 2014 was an unbelievable year for Wisconsin people because they had Wisconsin's quarterback, then Wisconsin's born quarterback in Romo, and then Wisconsin Badger and Wisconsin resident JJ Watt. Wow, what a cheesehead year 2014 turned out to be until they went to Seattle. But anyway, the meeting in 2016, because Romo missed almost all of 15 with various injuries, and then in 16 got hurt again, and so he's rehabbing and trying to hurry back as Dak Prescott's having this rookie season from heaven. I mean, the Cowboys. You probably were at Lambeau that day where the Cowboys rolled in there and with a rookie quarterback and a rookie running back just murdered the Packers at like a week 5 of 2016 or whatever it was. One of the rare times the Cowboys have murdered the Packers since I've basically since Favre and Aikman stopped playing each other. But that one was thorough. And so then they went to Pittsburgh and killed the Steelers. And this Dak Zeke rookie 214 thing, which is the area code down here, but also those two numbers together, it was sweeping the city. But many people rightfully pointed out that at the time, there's no question Tony Romo's the better quarterback. And so there's this weird thing that the Cowboys keep winning every week. But are we waiting for Romo or are they going to stay with Dak? And the story changes based on who you ask. But this part is absolutely true, is that Romo did, I think after the Pittsburgh game, which I want to say was week 9 or 10, Tyler, memory's going a little bit, but after they won in Pittsburgh, Tony Romo did a press conference, which basically conceded the job to Dak. And the story, which I believe to be 100% true, is that Jason Garrett found out that Tony Romo was going to do that as he's watching it on TV. That Romo, and it was weird because why would Romo even do that other than Romo felt weird about taking the job back when the team is 9-1 or 10-1 or whatever they were at the time. And, it ended up being really complicated, of course, because what happened at Cowboy Stadium with Aaron Rodgers and Mason Crosby and Jared Cook. But that weird path and basically what appeared to be zero say from the head coach on who his quarterback was going to be and even how it was all going to play out and really how Tony Romo's career sort of ended that day is I think one of the better examples of how things work down here and really why some of us wonder
We're
how
back.
long they're doomed because
We're back. For those watching, listening live, that's what do you call it in the radio industry, Bob? What was the term you just told me offline?
Well, we certainly call what happened there an emergency break, but I think that's
Yeah.
probably just on my radio station where everything's fine and somebody pulled the e-brake and I was left all alone and I was
I,
very, very scared for a moment, but it worked out.
I left you stranded. I left you stranded in Substack Live. So I told Bob I've been recording a lot of these pods outside, and it's on my cell phone. And believe it or not, here in Western New York, it's pretty warm. It's hot, and my phone overheated and just shut down. So I guess your take was so scalding hot, Bob.
It
Like
was, yes.
it burned through my phone and just ended that Substack Live. But we'll wrap it up here on a
Yeah.
separate vid. We'll mash them together and disseminate to the masses. You were making an excellent point. I don't even remember, but pick up wherever you want.
It was just telling the story of Jason Garrett, kind of being head coach, but then realizing periodically, not, by the way, I want to be clear. Most days he is the head coach, but I just think, oh, I know what it was. I was basically saying, I believe that an NFL franchise kind of has to operate like the military with a chain of command and with a power structure that is sensible and to where each foot soldier understands that he must report to his superior and please his superior and not go right to the president. And so the Cowboys, basic power structure is Jerry and then the players and the coach is off to the side. And so on things that matter to Jerry, uh, Des Bryant can go directly to Jerry. Tony Romo can go directly to Jerry. Well, what that does, even unintentionally, is it eradicates a coach's, control of his team and the just the way that guys understand who they're following into battle. And more importantly, if the head coach disappoints you with a decision, maybe he makes you inactive. Maybe he wants the rookie to start in front of you. Maybe he wants you off his team because of whatever reason. I think in most NFL cities, a coach has the ability to do that. Surely 20 years ago, almost every coach had that ability, but now I realize that GMs have much more say in the matter. But I just think it's in general unhealthy to have players confused about who's in charge of their career or who's in charge of their week to week responsibilities on a football team. I don't think Detroit Lions are unclear that they answer to Dan Campbell and not the Ford family and not Brad Holmes, specifically on matters from week to week during the season. I think now, I'm biased because I consider Dan Campbell a friend, but I will tell you that I think that's the way to go. And I think the second I get to run the Cowboys, I'm trying to get Dan Campbell to run the Cowboys. And there's many reasons for that. And I know that's a bit of a left turn on my take here, Tyler, but I would just tell you that I believe the power structure, as much as things have changed in the NFL, that hasn't. And the Cowboys have tried to do it their own way where the coach can make 94% of the decisions a head coach makes, but not the other 6%. And I think that matters. And especially when, there are three teams that win a dozen games in the conference and you're trying to figure out, well, what's the difference between the two that have success in January and the one that doesn't? I think that 6% matters. And so whether it's draft day decisions or contract decisions or here's who your starting running back is, like that nonsense last season where they are trying to force Ezekiel Elliott to be the starter when he is clearly washed. And they even made Rico Dowdle inactive in San Francisco because they wanted Zeke and Delvin Cook to be the two running backs that week. It's like, guys, football is the ultimate meritocracy. If you're going to take merit out of the mix, what are we even doing? If we're just picking our guys or picking the guys who come directly to the owner. So long-winded as usual, but that's the frustration if I were to dig down. I will continue to say I do believe there are a lot of good stories to tell on the Cowboys, and I do believe they're going to win a lot of games. because they have a very talented team. But that missing 5% or 6% or whatever you want to, however you want to describe it, that matters. And that
Mhm.
has a lot to do with the second 30 years of the Super Bowl era.
To your Dan Campbell point, that's exactly how Sheila Ford Hamp went about rebuilding this thing. She took over
Yes.
and said, we're going to turn this around. Like, enough is enough. We're going to hire the right people. We're going to empower those people. And she completely just stays out of the way, stays out of the limelight. Brad Holmes is GM, Dan Campbell is
Yes.
head coach. They were 4-19-1 at one point.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
they didn't blink. Like, they knew that behind the scenes, the correct foundation was being built, and that light would turn on. And boy, did it ever! They're going to be an NFC contender year in and year out. It's I think that's what's front. Let's just to wrap up Dallas here, and then I want to
Yeah.
get your division. If anybody can catch Philly, I think that's what's most frustrating. It's not like they're just 3-14, this disaster zone of a franchise that is
Right.
a laughing stock. I mean, they've got enough talent to win it all. And part of me kind of went like this when Bryce Butler said it, but he said, "Look, if you put Patrick Mahomes on the Cowboys, I don't think he's winning the Super Bowl. You put Dak Prescott on the Chiefs, I think he's winning one." And I
Wow.
don't know if I'd go. I think Mahomes is, one of the greatest of all time, right there next to Tom Brady. But when you really think about it, and all these little things that kind of go into how an organization should be run, maybe he's got a point. Which brings us to the division. Philly's bringing back just about everybody and got stronger. Jane Daniels and the Commanders are coming. And you want to talk about a franchise that is run the right way. Man, I spent a lot of time talking to those assistant coaches, and they just go on and on and on and on about Dan Quinn, who, by the way, was in the Dallas. Dan
Yeah.
Quinn, ultimate culture changer, and they
Yeah.
do that correct hierarchy. And then even the Giants. I'm the biggest Joe Shane, Brian Dable apologist there is. And in fact, we did like this quarterback ranking thing at the site, Bob, and boy, I forget how pissed off people get when you rank things, because I
Oh
never.
my gosh.
And there's some really colorful statements and comments made from some of our subscribers, which is always appreciated. Bring the heat, please,
Right.
always.
Right.
But one person said, "Why don't you go write another puff piece on Dable and Shane, or like tell us more about how great these guys are?" And I said, I absolutely will, because I think the Giants are going to turn it around one of these days. But in this division, what's turning around for the Giants? Winning
Right.
6 games, 7 games. It's going to be tough for
Yeah.
all
It's a
three of those
slug.
teams existing in Philly's ecosystem right now.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Look, the Eagles have done it right, and what's amazing is they've taken so many wrong turns along the way, and it hasn't mattered. That's the thing about the Eagles story that is, I suppose, amazing if you like them, and frustrating if you can't stand them. Like most Cowboy fans, and frankly, Packer fans probably agree with Cowboy fans on whether the Eagles are their favorite or not. So that's kind of funny, but. No, the Eagles have done it the right way. Howie Roseman, who we thought was locked in the ultimate power struggle with Chip Kelly long ago, and perhaps lucky to stay on the island, even if he had to move his office down the hall. It's a phenomenal story of maybe screwing up on Carson Wentz and maybe screwing up on Sam Bradford and just all the wrong turns they took along the way, and they kind of understand that there are problems that will happen when we try to be bold. And that's, circling back to the Lions, they described that trade of Stafford as a bold move, because the comfortable move is to keep an icon and to keep a favored son in town. I'm not trying to retell history of that trade, but looking back at it, to get your quarterback for the future and a bunch of picks, that took some cojones, because, I think a lot of us thought the Lions would be using one of those picks to pick their next quarterback. And instead, they actually found a a quick path to be a heavyweight in the NFC for the foreseeable future. And even the move on Penei Sewell. I mean, there's a lot of there's a lot of bold moves the Lions have made, and they're not perfect, and they haven't won back-to-back Super Bowls. They're still chasing that dream themselves. But I think this particular franchise, Dallas, and that particular franchise in Philadelphia, I think where you can really see the differences are the ability to have a bold strike, to have it blow up in your face, and to remain undaunted. And we're just going to keep going. And we're go over the long term. We believe in our process, and we believe that we're going to end up winning more hands than losing. But we are going to lose a few hands. So everybody don't freak out if we lose a few hands, because we're going to win more than we lose in the long run. You have to understand how probabilities will work. And so they've done a great job. Now they've needed some luck. Jalen Carter falling to 9 or 10 or whatever he did, that's not Howie Roseman being a genius, but it is a genius move to say, I don't care why these 9 teams passed on Jalen Carter. We're willing to take the chance because he's too freaking good not to. And then, the Saquon move and the AJ Brown move and I think they've made their own breaks, and I don't know. I Honestly, I've come around on Nick Sirianni only because Nick Sirianni has survived. I was extremely cynical about him, and frankly cynical about Jalen Hurts. And now they're both made men. Like, what am I going to say now? Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni have proven everybody wrong when so many people, and I don't want to just make it a rings culture, Tyler, but I do think we have to acknowledge they did it. They went to the top, and a lot of teams haven't in a long, long time or ever. And so we're all chasing the Eagles. Washington's interesting because there's a story there, but in the back of my head, I do think Jordan Love and the Packers won a year early. And so in 23, when they killed the Cowboys, the day Mike McCarthy should have been fired. And that's its own long answer. So I'll spare you. But, that year, I think Jordan Love and the Packers won a year early, and it raised expectations, and we kind of saw the regression in 2024. Even though their record was better, I think they just kind of flipped those 2 years, maybe, and maybe I'm wrong, but I almost wonder if Washington won so much a year early that now people go to work on Cliff Kingsbury's offense. They start, Washington becomes a big game instead of a so-so game when you play Washington for the first 15. I'm not positive Washington's on a straight trip to the moon, is what I'm saying. So I kind of think them and the Cowboys will be battling for second. I could be wrong. That's why going back to the over-unders of, I think Washington might be 9.5 and Dallas 7.5. That feels like one of those is way wrong to me. But again, it's July, so the Giants are the Giants. I also expected them to run faster, but I think this is a quarterback league. And so maybe the difference between the Giants and Washington is just one team got Jaden Daniels right, and one team has made a number of false quarterback moves that they'd like to have back. And so it's a fascinating division. And frankly, it's better when Washington and the Giants aren't absurdly bad. And it's been that way for a long time. And so it has been Dallas and Philadelphia, and obviously Philadelphia's. I'm not going to put Dallas on Philadelphia's level because Philadelphia's won 2 Super Bowls with completely different casts, and right down to the coaches and quarterbacks and everything. Like what Philadelphia has done in the last decade has absolutely worth everybody's praise, even if you've lived most of your life rooting against the Eagles. They are the blueprint for what you want to be in the league right now. But it's a fun division to say the least. It keeps us busy, right?
No doubt. I mean, I was born in 1987, but Peter King always would point to like the late 80s, early 90s. NFC East is like a glory era.
Yes.
When you think of like Joe Gibbs and Bill Parcells and Buddy Ryan and those Eagles defenses, Reggie White, Jerome Brown, and obviously the Cowboys. Those were bloodbaths. So maybe, kind of get
I mean,
back to
think
that
about it.
point. Believe in the Giants, which I do. It'd be
Well,
great.
yeah, I mean, if you take what Super Bowl 21 to Super Bowl 30, you've got three of the four franchises in the NFC East winning the Super Bowl multiple times, right? The Giants won a couple, the Redskins won a couple, the Cowboys won three. Like from 21 to 30, this division ran the NFL. And I know the 49ers fans will push back and the Bills had glorious runs and so forth, but that's incredible. And the other team, the Eagles, and I realize it wasn't a four-team division back then, but the Eagles were unbelievable. They just couldn't figure it out at the end. But I mean, that is prime Reggie White, Jerome Brown, and that whole crew. So even the fourth best team in the NFC East during that window of is Buddy Ryan and throwing snowballs at Jimmy Johnson and all that stuff at the vet, and 1986 to 1995. Find me a 10-year period where a division was that dominant in the entire league with Joe Gibbs, Bill Parcells, Jimmy Johnson, the end of Tom Landry, and again, the Eagles with Randall Cunningham, prime, and Reggie White, and just all. I mean, it's crazy looking back at that decade. So everything Peter King told you was right. It was unbelievable.
And there is, you mentioned like Howie kind of landing Jalen Carter. Like there is some luck there, but maybe if there's a lesson to take, you can create your own luck. I mean, they fleeced the New Orleans Saints on a trade, I believe, that year prior. You go
The
back and
Marcus Davenport, right?
right, that's where they got that ninth. He's just always looking for a sucker, right? Like the Tennessee
Mm-hmm.
Titans, they don't want to double down on Tannehill and Derrick Henry and Taylor Lewan and AJ
Right,
Brown and this team, this core that they were the number one seed the year prior. John Robinson, I believe, didn't really want to pay everybody, so they're not going to give AJ Brown 100 mil. Enter Howie Roseman. Here's a first round pick. Have fun with Traylon Burks. We'll take AJ Brown and then we'll pay him
right.
twice because they do have that trust from ownership. Two, unlike the Cowboys, get tied up in dead money and bills down the road. So
Yeah,
they're playing chess while other teams are playing checkers. And I think that, yeah, they're the team to beat in this division. As much as I love the Commanders, Jaden Daniels, let's see Jaden Daniels can hold up for another year or two. The health is another deal. He is very, very thin. But he didn't take a lot of hits year
right,
one.
right.
Eagles, Commanders, and I'll actually say that those Cowboys and the Giants are gonna duke it out for that third spot.
Yeah, well, it's very likely. The Cowboys this year at least have the benefit of I don't think anybody is pumping their tires league wide,
Sure.
like, and maybe for good reason. I mean, this felt like a far more active off season because they added these 11 or 12 NFL veteran free agents, but they really only spent any money on one of them, Dante Fowler, 1 year, 6 million. And that's the big price, Tyler. So they're making a lot of plays on guys who were once highly thought of. Kenneth Murray, they want to try that at linebacker. Kaiir Elam, your boy from Buffalo, former first round pick up there. You start going down the list. They're running back, with Javonte Williams here and Miles Sanders there. And, it's obviously even people will tell you George Pickens is discounted for a reason. Although I think that's going to be brilliant for this offense, frankly, to pair. Maybe George Pickens by himself with Kenny Pickett is not going to change the league. But George Pickens as your number two with CeeDee Lamb drawing doubles all day and and Dak Prescott behind the wheel, I do think George Pickens is going to and by the way, playing for a contract, I do think George Pickens is going to be a problem for a lot of teams in this division and in this conference. So, they're going to sneak up on people, whether that means anything. I mean, losing DeMarcus Lawrence and then replacing him with Dante Fowler and just a host of who knows. And defensive tackle did not exactly get fixed, but here's Solomon Thomas to help Osa Odigizua. And Mozzie Smith is still, hey, are you going to do anything at some point as a first round pick? So, it's a lot of maybes. And I suppose in July, all the maybes look good. But, then you get to September and you're like, why did we think this was going to work? So that's where we're at.
I mean, that's the quintessential bottom feeding that's always been the edict from Steven in free agency. We're going to let those first 48 hours pass. Doesn't matter that we just won 12 games. Doesn't matter that we might just be one or two pieces away.
Right.
Gold, he just listed off a bunch of these guys on minimum to close to minimum deals. And I think that where you run into trouble is, okay, you suffer an injury or two injuries, a little bit of attrition, and you just don't have the depth.
Right.
You're going to win games with players who wouldn't make the rosters of other teams. And I see, I think it's one of your subscribers down there giving me hell for slotting the Cowboys in at third here on the Substack Live. Okay, we'll put them in at fourth. For that very minute BC, they're because they're going to have a couple injuries, and I don't think they're equipped to handle that attrition. And I love Dak. Always loved Dak. See, I'm with you on the weaponry, but it's going to be fun. I mean, really, fourth place in this division, it might be 7-10, 8-9. This is going to be a sneaky, strong division throughout the entire league, I think.
Yeah. And, I mean, that's how the league works. We could do the same thing with the NFC North. Like, who's the fourth best team, and
Yeah.
and what does that mean? And I certainly realize the AFC North has a good conversation, and you start looking around at just you know even your AFC West, where you're like, gosh, is the fourth best team the Raiders, and isn't that a interesting squad?
That's so.
So it's the NFL. It's what keeps us all hooked on this thing, and it makes our content choices pretty easy, because there's so much to talk about all the time, and so many different ways to look at this league, and it's honestly why I really love what you're doing. I finally got to your Tyron Hopper piece, and for people who don't understand what Tyler's doing, just check out the Tyron Hopper piece, because I challenge you to find in this universe anybody who cares enough about football to write that long a piece about that type of player, who I think played 18 snaps in his rookie season. And you got me thinking, man, is this guy about to take over the league? And he might be. That's what's great is your passion for the stuff that isn't as obvious as, is Dak ever going to win the big one? I mean, that's what I care about, is what you write. And you introduced me to guys, I don't know their stories, and the depth and the long reads in this world of people trying to learn things through tweets. I think Go Long is awesome, and that's why I was a customer before I opened my own shop, and I still am a customer, and I always will be. So it's I just want, and I suppose if anyone's watching this, they already know about you, but maybe through some of my subscribers, man, if you love the game of football and what it's all about, it's Go Long is killing it. So I love what you guys do to inspire me.
Checks in the mail, Bob. Guy, that was quick, kind. Thank you so much. That means the world. And hey, I can't really thank everybody out there enough for wanting to hit pause on life. I mean, all of us are scrolling. All of us are running around 100 miles an hour. We just had our third kiddo. I get it. Life,
Yeah.
the fact that people want to actually, right, maybe take their brain back a little bit, learn something for a half hour. That's how we're able to go into season number 6, right in long form on the NFL. And I really encourage all of my listeners, subscribers right now, add the Sturm to your lineup. Bob does an unbelievable job. You are so prolific on all of the teams down there in Dallas Fort Worth, where, I love checking in on those Cowboys, but like the Mavericks are fascinating. We could spend another hour trying to make sense of what they're doing. I mean,
Yes.
I saw Cooper Flagg's name come across the screen. I care about his summer league performance. So this is an interesting time down there. And whether you're in Dallas or not in Dallas, subscribe, read, listen. Bob does a hell of a job.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a great market. I never growing up and watching the Cowboys torture young Brett Favre like they did,
Oh,
I never imagined I'd live here my whole life. But I got here in '98. I've lived here longer than I lived in Wisconsin by a mile. I've had all my kids here. They're all at least in college now or out of college, and so it's been crazy. But now I've raised a bunch of Texans, even though nobody will let me call myself one because. I wasn't born here, Tyler, so you know the rules. But it's been great. I love this sports city. I could do without 105 in the summers, but otherwise it's been an unbelievable trip. Even if I do insist on keeping Giannis here behind me at all times to remind me where I'm from.
I was hoping we get a little Vin Baker, Sherman Williams, maybe those purple Bucks era teams.
Yeah,
So that's my shot.
You,
That
you know what happened, Tyler, is I was eating pizza with my family not long ago, and Sidney Moncrief was at the next table, and I couldn't believe that I was sitting next to Sir Sid in Dallas eating pizza. And it's one of those moments where you see somebody who you recognize, but you're only 98% sure it's them. And so you're spending about 20 minutes gaining the courage. And then I find, and he couldn't have been nicer. So to run into Sir Sid and other Wisconsin heroes who have all relocated down here, like the other day, Nick Van Exel was playing golf right in front of me. And that was so great. And Michael Finley is down here, of course. And so Tony Romo, as you know. So the cheeseheads who were done with winter have all made their way to North Texas, I guess.
Well, hey man, that was awesome. We'll fuse these two Substack live audio, video pods together and get it out to everybody. So thanks so much to everybody who's hanging out live as well. We got to do this again, Bob. That was fantastic. Thanks so
I
much.
would love that, Tyler. Keep it going, man. Say hi to
You
Bob
as
for
well.
me.
Thank you.